Ready for a deep dive into some feelings we could all probably handle a little better?
Always up for that.
We're talking anger, fear, guilt, that whole tricky trio, and how they can really mess things up if we let them.
Yeah, it's like they gang up on you, right?
Totally. And this book we're looking at, Ira, Miedo y Culpa, doesn't sugarcoat it. It actually calls those three the three horsemen of the apocalypse.
Bit dramatic, maybe, but you know what? It kind of fits. It's not that those feelings are bad in themselves,
Right. We all have
but
them.
when they get all tangled up, that's when they really start causing problems.
So they feed off each other. How does that work exactly?
Okay, picture this. You're at work, things are stressful, and you snap at a coworker. Anger, right there.
Been there.
But then the guilt sets in. Why'd I say that? Now they probably think I'm a jerk.
And then the fear kicks in.
Exactly. What if they complain to the boss? What if this ruins our working relationship?
So it goes from this one outburst to this whole spiral in your head.
Exactly. And it can be paralyzing. What this book does so well is it shows you how to spot those emotions early before they become a bigger issue.
Prevention is key. So let's break it down. What about anger specifically? How does the book suggest we handle that fiery one?
Well, we often think of anger as these big, explosive moments. But the book makes a good point that it can be subtle, too, like simmering resentment.
Oh yeah, the silent treatment, holding grudges.
Exactly. And that stuff can be just as damaging in the long run, especially in relationships.
Totally agree. So how do we stop ourselves from going there?
Well, a big thing is resisting that urge to act immediately when you feel that anger rising.
Easier said than done, right?
For sure. But think about those times you hit send on an email too quickly. We've all been there.
Oh, way too many times. And that feeling of regret is the worst.
Right. This book talks about paying attention to the physical signs of anger in your body.
Okay, what do you mean by that?
Well, what happens when you get angry? Heart racing, face gets hot, maybe your hands clench up.
Yeah, actually, I can feel that just thinking about it.
Right. Noticing those sensations without judgment can really help you catch yourself in those moments.
It's like your body's giving you a heads up before your mind even catches up.
Exactly. And that can be the difference between reacting impulsively and responding thoughtfully.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense. Now, let's talk about fear. That one can be so paralyzing. What insights does the book offer on tackling that beast?
One of the biggest ones is that fear is often based on what we tell ourselves, not actual reality.
Oh, I am the queen of worst-case scenarios. My imagination runs wild sometimes.
We all do it. But like the book says, a lot of those fears come from past experiences or assumptions that might not even be true anymore.
So how do we break free from those old and often inaccurate fear stories? It's like we need to fact-check our own fears.
Exactly. This book is big on challenging those thoughts,
Hmm.
really putting them on trial.
So like gathering evidence, cross-examining those anxious thoughts. I like it.
Exactly. Ask yourself, is this fear based on facts or am I getting carried away here? Like that presentation you're dreading, is it really going to be a disaster or are you letting past experiences get to you?
It's so easy to fall into that what-if trap.
Absolutely. And that's where open communication comes in. The book talks about how often fear just loves to hang out in the darkness of unspoken assumptions.
Okay, that makes me think about relationships. Like when you convince yourself your partner's upset with you, but you haven't even talked about it.
Exactly. Often, just saying those fears out loud can really take away their power. There's even this example in the book about a woman who was terrified of public speaking,
I feel that.
but just confiding in a colleague before presentation, just that little bit of sharing really helped calm her nerves.
It's like those fears lose some of their power when they're not bottled up inside.
Okay, let's switch gears to guilt. That's a heavy one. Feels like everyone's carrying a ton of it these days.
You're telling me. But this book makes a really important distinction between guilt and remorse.
Okay, I'm intrigued. What's the difference? Well, guilt, that's the one that keeps you stuck, punishing yourself for past mistakes. Remorse, on the other hand, it's about acknowledging what happened, learning from it, and then moving on.
So guilt's like beating yourself up for spilling the milk, and remorse is about cleaning it up and maybe learning to use a sippy cup next time.
I love that analogy because remorse is about growth, not self-punishment. It's way more constructive.
Hmm.
The book even suggests asking yourself, what can I do differently next time? Shifting that focus from blame to action.
Turning those I messed up moments into opportunities to learn. I like it. Okay, I'm really starting to see these emotions in a new light. But this brings up a question for our listeners. Of these three, anger, fear, or guilt, which one tends to trip you up the most? Take a second to think about it.
Yeah, it's a powerful question. Recognizing our own patterns is a huge step. And what I love about this book is it doesn't just name these emotions. It gives us actual tools to work with them.
Like a toolkit for emotional intelligence. I like that. So let's dive into those tools. What are some key takeaways for actually taming these inner beasts, as we called them earlier?
Well, one thing that really stuck with me is that it's not about suppressing these emotions completely. That's not realistic. And honestly, it's not even healthy.
Right, they're part of being human.
Exactly. It's more about building a better relationship with them, becoming more skilled at navigating them.
Learning to ride the waves, not getting completely wiped out by them.
Exactly. And the book offers a really practical, step-by-step approach for each emotion. For anger, it talks about really tuning in to those physical sensations in your body. We touched on this earlier, but it's about noticing those cues, the clenched jaw, the racing heart, without judgment.
Like your body's giving you those early warning signals.
Precisely. And then, once you've noticed those signals, creating space before reacting. Don't speak, don't send that email, don't make any big decisions in the heat of the moment. The book gives this great example of a CEO who used to fire off angry emails to his team all the time.
Oh no, I know that type.
Right, so he started this thing where he'd write the email, but he wouldn't send it for 24 hours.
Did he ever end up sending them?
He said 9 times out of 10, he realized it wasn't even worth sending. And the few times he did, he could at least rewrite them without all that initial anger.
That's a good strategy. Okay, so we've got noticing the physical sensations, creating space before reacting. What else helps with anger?
One of my favorite takeaways was about shifting from reacting to responding. It builds on that idea of creating space, but takes it a step further. Instead of getting caught up in being right or proving your point, it's about asking yourself, what outcome do I actually want in this situation?
So instead of snapping back with a sarcastic comment, you pause and consider what will actually be constructive.
Exactly, and that shift in thinking can make a world of difference.
Shifting from reaction to responding, that's huge. Like you're choosing to be in control instead of letting your emotions control you. So we've covered anger. What about fear? What are some practical tips for dealing with that one?
One of the things the book suggests might surprise you. It's curiosity.
Curiosity. How does that help when you're dealing with fear?
It's about leaning in instead of shutting down. So ask yourself, what's the story I'm telling myself about this situation? And is there any evidence to back it up? What might happen if I chose to act differently this time?
So it's about challenging those fear-based assumptions and being open to new possibilities. Like fear really can hold you back.
It can. And another thing that's really important to remember, fear often comes from feeling alone with those scary thoughts and feelings.
There is that.
This book, it really emphasizes the importance of talking to someone you trust, a friend, family member, maybe even a therapist. Just sharing those fears out loud can make a huge difference.
There's that theme again. Communication is key. Whether it's anger, fear, or even guilt, talking about it seems to help. Speaking of guilt, what about that last horseman? How do we move from self-criticism to that healthier place of learning and growing?
That's where self-compassion comes in. And this book, it talks about treating yourself with the same kindness you'd offer a close friend. If they messed up, you'd be there for them.
Of course. We're often so much harder on ourselves than we are on anyone else.
Absolutely. And this book reminds us that we're all human. We all make mistakes. It's about what we do after the mistake that really matters.
So how do we cultivate that self-compassion, especially when we're feeling guilty?
Well, one simple but powerful practice is to actually talk to yourself kindly, the same way you would talk to a friend. Imagine they're feeling guilty. What would you say? Now try saying those same words to yourself.
It's amazing how often we forget to do that.
It's true. And it all goes back to that idea that self-care isn't selfish. It's essential.
You can't pour from an empty cup.
Exactly.
Yeah.
When you take care of yourself, you're in a much better place to show up for the people you care about.
It's like that old saying, you can't truly love others until you love yourself. Taking care of yourself is an act of love, not just for you, but for everyone around you.
I love that.
This has been such an eye-opening deep dive. You know, one thing that really stood out to me was that idea of love being the antidote. When we can cultivate more love and acceptance for ourselves, it naturally flows into our relationships. So true. Your inner world shapes your outer experience.
Now, before we wrap things up, I want to leave you with a little something to think about. Blaise Pascal once said, "All of humanity's problems stem from man's inability to sit quietly in a room alone." So how can we all, in this busy world, Carve out those moments of quiet reflection, those moments to just be with ourselves and our emotions. How can we cultivate a deeper sense of peace and self-acceptance? I think those are really important questions for all of us.
I agree. Those are questions worth exploring.
On that note, we'll wrap up this deep dive into ira, miedo y culpa. We hope you found it insightful, and we encourage you to keep exploring these ideas. Most importantly, keep showing up for yourselves with curiosity, kindness, and that willingness to learn and grow. Until next time.